We start with a point.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeff Richards. We have a fantastic guest in studio with me right now, Rob Bryanton. He has been a figure in the arts and in the film scene locally here for many years, and actually not even locally, nationally across Canada, working throughout much of the film industry here in Saskatchewan. He's also an author and a thinker, and one heck of a thinker, I will tell you, because he has put together a phenomenal book called Imagining the 10th Dimension. The subtitle, A New Way of Thinking About Space and Time. Mr. Rob Bryanton joins me in studio right now. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Now, what's interesting is we actually have, we're twisting a little bit of space and time here in studio, because you're recording this interview in full 360 degree view right now through a camera. So I think off air you sort of termed it as you're creating this beautiful jewel of space and time.
Exactly. It's what Bruce Sterling, the science fiction author. Are we okay? Is the mic
No,
working?
we're not okay actually.
Okay.
I'm getting the note from our producer Mike here that we can't hear Rob. One moment, we have a little bit of a wrinkle here. Apparently one of our in-studio microphones seems...
Check.
Nothing. Okay. No, we might have to just move you here, Rob. My apologies. We'll shift you over to this one here.
Okay.
And so here we are. If you're listening, live radio, these things happen.
And now if you're watching in virtual reality.
Yes. Okay. Can we give that one a try, Rob?
Yeah.
Just be sure we got
Check. Test
okay,
1, 2.
Much better. So you can position that mic. My apologies, Rob. So as I said, we're recording this interview in full 360 degrees, virtual reality, essentially VR. So you said you're creating this little jewel of space and time. What a beautiful turn of phrase.
It is, and it's a scientific concept as well. It's called a spime, a space-time object. And when Bruce Sterling first talked about it, he was talking about Walmart tracking all these goods and services that all needed to be there just in time to allow them to have maximum profit. And it's the same thing now with the stuff that we're talking about here.
The idea that there are 10 dimensions for most people, I think, would cause them a little bit of, how do I term this? Maybe panic, because they're only aware of maybe 4, but really only 3, very likely. And once you stress past that, do you find that most people, when they're looking at these concepts, kind of scratch their heads a bit when you get to the 5th through 10th dimensions and the explanations of what those exactly entail?
Well, my experience has been that I agree with Kip Thorne, the fellow who was the scientific consultant on Interstellar. And basically he says it's the 5th dimension that really matters. Anything beyond that, you don't really have to know about. It's just that's the stuff we're not.
Right.
And so there's a dividing line that's happening there in the 5th dimension that is the unique point that represents any space-time object, including my consciousness, your consciousness, the consciousness of everybody who is listening right now.
Let's talk the first 3 dimensions.
Okay.
So we've got the first dimension, which you describe in the book as sort of being like a point on a page.
The first dimension is really the line that is created by 2 points. So there's a 0 that you need to start from, and that's the point. And that's, everybody knows the movie that started with it. We start with a point. Like the point we know from geometry, it has no size, no dimension. It's just an idea that indicates a position in a system. To get to a first dimensional line, all we need is another point.
And that is from the animation.
More or less, yeah.
That was pretty close. So the second and third dimensions, then, where do those? What are those? Explain those to the audience listening.
So the idea here is you start with a point which is already could be the everything or it could be the very specific. And so if you're thinking about a 2-dimensional XY graph, that's a system, right? And any point that's on that XY graph, doesn't matter how specific or how big it is, it still somehow locates itself within the XY graph, right? It assigns values to those opposing directions and it's orthogonal directions, 90 degrees to each other that we're talking about here always. because the reason we're having this conversation is string theory says that we are deriving our reality from 10 spatial or space-like dimensions. So whether this is the explanation for string theory or not, I've always said it's not. I've said that right from the moment that I released this project. I said this is a creative way of thinking that a lot of people find really useful. Now the fact that it also lines up with 10 dimensions in string theory has some interesting things that people like to talk about as well. So that's why there are all these millions of people around the world that have watched the movies and watched all the conversations that are happening afterwards. There's still very active comment sections on all the movies. There's about 400 movies at the 10th dim, as it's called. 10THDIM is the channel where all these videos are. And we're at 16 million views right now. 16
million views, 16 million sets of eyeballs have watched some of the theories and some of the work that you've put into the examination of what exactly these dimensions entail and sort of what they mean to us as a populace.
Right.
Now, what's interesting to me is the fourth dimension, because we talked about if we were to take ourselves in the fourth dimension as we exist, and what we would look like, what that sort of that amorphous sort of that snake-like creature that would be created if we stretched ourselves out in that fourth dimension, which is a dimension that essentially is duration or time.
Yep.
But we would see ourselves as an embryo right on to the point of death.
Right.
That's amazing to me, just that concept.
So the thing about that is once you know more about it, you also understand that that's an oversimplification, because every moment in time there's atoms and molecules and energies and forces that are coming out of us and going into us. So it's not a snake, it's a cloud, right? And it happens to be a cloud of probabilistic outcomes as well at the quantum level, and that's where you get into the interesting quantum physics parts of the conversation as well.
And the idea of the fifth dimension then is sort of, from my understanding, is the probabilities with regards to sort of where those individual branches and paths for us might lead in terms of our decisions that we make and sort of the paths that we follow as individuals, yes?
Yes, and also Einstein agreed with the idea that our reality is defined at the fifth dimension. Back in 1921, he was presented with a paper that said our reality's energies are make more sense with each other if you view them from the fifth dimension. So the idea that we come from the fifth dimension has been around for a long time now, but somehow doesn't seem to have ever really made it into mainstream consciousness, I would say Imagining 10th Dimension has done a lot to try to forward that way of thinking. And the thing is, that way of thinking ties to the fact that we start with a point, and you are the point. And I am the point, and we are all moving through these probabilistic clouds of possibilities at any moment. But anybody's probability cloud isn't all, all these completely different people. It's kind of all the parts that make us up. And, like one of the things we talk about in the book is how that's how you can get into intuition or genetic memory or, any of the physicalities that affect the way your genetics are being expressed. Epigenetics, there's so many different ways of thinking of this once you get past the fourth dimension and this snake of just, there's a beginning, there's an end. That's all there is. Well, the fifth dimension is the reality, right? Because there's always the branches that are happening. And everybody remembers the big branches that happen in their own life, right? That's what your memories are constructed from.
Of course, of course. We're live right now with Rob Bryanton, the author of Imagining the 10th Dimension. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more of this discussion, more Imagining the 10th Dimension here live on Newstalk 980 CJME and Newstalk 650 CKOM. Okay, so far so good. And of course, we can continue the discussion now that we're off the air here. We can continue talking in terms of this here.
Okay.
Now, when we come back, I kind of want to talk a little bit about what you feel is the most significant dimension. Because I feel like it's that sort of that fourth and that fifth kind of in there is where you would put it.
Yeah.
Am I
fifth
wrong?
is where Einstein agrees, and everybody else ever since
Okay.
who knows about the science of it
Okay.
is willing to accept the fifth dimension. That's why Kip Thorne, who is, he's big stuff in the physics world. And for him to say our realities, the possibilities of what we're experiencing are in the fifth dimension, that's what I've been saying since 10 years ago when the project was launched.
Breaking into our dimension right now, Mike Sweeney.
Hey, so I just realized if you do need to cough, you can just turn that off and then turn it back on and you'll be back on the air.
That's the kill switch I've always heard of.
Yeah. We don't have a
You just hit this
straight up. We don't have a straight up cough button for guests, but that can work as kind of.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
No, I have no idea how long this camera's going to record, so
Sure.
we'll find an appropriate place to cut it off so we don't
Of course,
quit mid-idea. But
absolutely.
the idea now that you can use this for personal events is what makes this such a great thing to be able to just offer as a service to people, right?
So they would rent this from your.
Yeah, this is my company's Talking Dog Studios, and TalkingDogStudios.com is where you would go to look at getting your family events recorded in 360 degrees with multiple 360 degree cameras, because that's the one thing is, with this setup, if there was something back there, that back wall that I was interested in, I've only got the one camera POV, so it gets better the more cameras you can put into the space.
Okay.
So
we'll mention that on the air too.
Sure.
With some of the VR stuff towards the end there.
Great.
Give the studio a little bit of a push.
I appreciate that.
No worries at all. I apologize. I'm just trying to manage we've got our text line up and people are texting in questions and responses to things that are being said. Facebook, the Twitter. Kind of have to manage not only the on-air stuff but also the social media stuff as we go, because it kind of does. It does move and it does sort of everything sort of fits and works together here.
Yeah,
so.
That's the modern way to do it.
And it's great. Like I find our listeners really respond. Somebody commented, they said after watching the video, I realized my name will never be Sheldon Cooper. So it was a little bit too much for Barbara. She's about 80 years old. I know Barb's a client of mine from a.
I would say if somebody wants to start with my project now, I'd probably suggest they watch my video Imagining the Fourth Dimension.
Okay.
Because that gives you a way to understand how you're going to get to the fifth. And that's the problem. If you think the fourth dimension is time, you're barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah. So it's duration, not time.
Well, exactly. It's the difference between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. You've heard that quote, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about.
Okay. I was curious how it would translate through radio, because a lot of what's really great about seeing the book is there's some drawings and diagrams and things that you do within the book, and then when you look at the animations, it's even clearer to actually see the points and sort of how everything just sort of evolves there. So we're about to go live here again.
Okay.
Imagining the 10th dimension, a new way of thinking about time and space. Rob Bryanton joins us live in studio right now. The website, 10thdimension.com. I highly recommend moving over there and having a look at some of the animations, the videos that Rob has created to explain a lot of these concepts. Because as you're sitting there listening, some of them might seem a little abstract and maybe you can't quite grasp them, but the animations really put them into perspective. Now, Rob, if there are individuals out there right now who are curious about the 10th dimension and sort of they want to get their feet wet with one of these animations, one of these videos to start their journey, is there one that you would recommend to watch before the others?
Well, originally the one that came out in 2006, the funny thing is we're celebrating the 10th anniversary of Imagining the 10th Dimension.
Synchronicity, all the numbers, everything lining up right now. I love it.
And the idea that time is a circle really ties into that concept as well, right? So I would say if you're going to watch a video right now, Imagining the Fourth Dimension is a video. If you just Google that or YouTube search that, then that's a great way to introduce you to that. If we're just talking about spatial dimensions, there's something called the point line plane postulate that is the accepted scientific way of visualizing any number of dimensions. So if we're going to start from whatever the background is, where does this all come from? I believe the ultimate ensemble concept that Max Tegmark describes is really what there is back there. There's just this sea of information, and there's these patterns that arise out of that information that relate to the bifurcations of chaos theory, right? Where it's noise and then something interesting pops out. Well, one of the interesting things that pops out from this landscape multiverse is a universe like ours, right? And so now you've got a logical ball of energy there that is going to be like a big bang to us when we look back at it from our perspective. But really, it's just this pattern in space-time, right? So if we're talking about imagining ourselves in the fourth dimension, then we have to stop thinking of the fourth dimension as time. Time, yes, is part of the fourth dimension, but what we're really talking about is the beginning and the end, or the duration, which describes a line which extends to infinity in both directions, and that's your XY graph again, right?
Right.
Those axes, they go forever. It's actually interesting to then think that if it's infinity, that really they must wrap around. And again, we get back to this idea of how there's so many things about our reality that are the result of repeating patterns. It's obvious, it's plain as the nose on your face, right? That patterns happen.
What's interesting to me too is that throughout our existence, the idea of the circle is so prevalent. There's so many circles. You talk about something as simple as the water cycle, which is science. We understand that. That's a circle. It's a giant circle. We talk about the circle of life, that sort of, that popularized idea of sort of things after death continuing and going back into the soil and growing up as the plants and and the circle of life continuing on.
Well, and don't forget, well, as you know, of course, all the Native American connections to this as well. Like the thing that I got to build for Wanuskewin when it first opened, this virtual reality audio presentation was happening in that space. As you went around the circle of the seasons, there was this cloud of randomized sounds appropriate to the time of day and the location that you're in that were being generated by an algorithmic composition tool that I'd created for it.
Wow. So part of what you do, because we talk about the 10th dimensions, we talk about reality and sort of making reality malleable, you create reality. And something like that installation in Wanuskewin, that's its own unique reality that you have created. Would you not agree?
That was absolutely, and the reason it needed to have that life is because if it was just a bunch of tape loops that went on and on relentlessly, the staff would be driven crazy by it, and they would turn the speakers down, and the effectiveness of the soundscape would be gone, right? So that's the reason we designed it that way in the first place. Those are the kinds of things that I've been interested in for as long as I was able to get, my hand on a rheostat.
How did this exploration start? What was the catalyst for you sitting down and saying, you know what, I wanna bring something together that explores my ideas and my theories on what reality truly is? Because that's what this book really is. It's exploring reality and all facets of reality and how we look at and view reality. So how did that start for you?
Well, there was two starting points. The first was little Robbie Bryanton at 7 years old running through a field to his neighbors to show his report card from the end of the year, and he was really proud of it and happy, and his foot stepped into a gopher hole. And at that moment, reality seemed to shift. There was this tilt that happened, which I'm familiar with now from the other times when I've stepped out into space thinking I was on the bottom step, and your brain gets a jolt when something like that happens.
Right.
To me, that seemed significant because I felt that there at that moment were many versions of me that broke their leg or something worse happened, right?
So you had that thought and that feeling as a little boy?
At the age 7, yeah.
Wow.
So, but I don't know, like that's the thing is a lot of what we're talking about here is arrived at through intuition. I've always made it clear that I'm not a scientist, I'm not a physicist, I'm not pretending to be a physicist. It's always said this is a creative exploration that we're talking about here that is fun to do because it has so many different ways of tying together other schools of thought and other approaches to where does our reality come from.
What does it all mean, really? Within the confines of this book and this idea of the dimensions, the fifth dimension is really where fate would lie. Would you not agree?
It's where, if you're talking about Everett's many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, it's where all the versions of you lie. And so that means there is a best possible version of you from this moment forward to the end of your life, right?
Yeah.
Are you going to get there? Well, that has a lot to do with your shape and your trajectory that you're already on, you know? So
what do you think for yourself personally, Rob? Is this the best or most ideal version of Rob right now? Or is there a Rob somewhere else sitting in a similar studio talking about something completely different? Maybe he's talking about medical conditions or something like. Would the events be the same and just the overlay around the events be different?
Well, for me, what I think about more now as I'm an aging person, I'm 62 years old now, so I think a lot about all the versions of me that are already dead, and how there's that cloud of people that are following along with their chain of attention, because there's no reason at all for you to think, we have so much evidence that there are ways that the patterns of our consciousness goes on beyond the physical body and can happen and can have connections outside the physical body. I mean, isn't that how intuition, isn't that how readings work, right? I mean, you know about all this stuff.
Of course.
So once you start thinking of the pattern, what is the pattern? Well, John Wheeler, the physicist, calls the universe a self-excited circuit. And so that's the idea that there's this burning candle, this fuse that is all these Planck frames, as they call them. I used to call them Planck frames because that's the way I first heard it, but the cool guys apparently darken it a little bit beyond that. So that's how our reality is being derived, right, is by all these frames that are the fourth dimension, one after another. And that's why the long undulating snake thing works, because if we were a computer animation, then it really would be just a slice like that you could be sliding through, right? But again, the cloud thing is really the reality of that, if you're going to think more deeply about it. But that space-time object approach to not just physical things, but to idea things, is what also makes this so fascinating, right?
We are exploring right now the reality of where we're at in this life and sort of everything around us with the brilliant mind that is Rob Bryant, and he's sitting across from me right now live in studio. His book, Imagining the 10th Dimension, some eye-opening things in there. We're going to continue this discussion because I'm curious what Rob's theory has in relation to ghosts and the paranormal and the existence of spiritual contact. This is Paranormal, and you're listening to News Talk 980 CJME and News Talk 650 CKOM.